So this morning we're going to be looking at Luke chapter 12, which is actually a continuation of last week. And one thing I want to just kind of remind you of is that in the beginning of the chapter, Luke tells us that there are thousands of people that are gathered to hear, to see, to experience Jesus. But I want to give you a sense, because it's important in this context, to think about those people. Because in this crowd of thousands, there was a lot of stress, a stress that you and I don't understand. See, because they didn't have HEB. Many of them didn't know where tomorrow's meal was coming from or if there would be a meal tomorrow. They didn't have Target where they could go get new clothes when they needed them. They didn't have bank accounts. They didn't have the comfort of this AC. Their lives were a stress that you and I really can't imagine. They would have physical afflictions that in today's world, you simply went to the ER or to the doctor and they would be remedied. But they would have to live with these afflictions, painful afflictions, debilitating afflictions. It was a very, very stressful way of life, not comfortable like ours, okay? And we talked about last week about coveting, and Jesus admonished us about coveting, and he talks about this rich guy and his farm. You remember that? And this is the continuation of that conversation. So let's look at Luke 12, chapter 22. And he said to his disciples, "For this reason I say to you," for this reason. What reason? So you have to remember, he had just admonished them about coveting, and he told the story about the rich guy, and he's suggesting that we can be freed from coveting and what the peril of the rich guy was. And so he's suggesting, in addition to being freed from that, there's something else you could be freed from. For this reason I say to you, do not worry about your life. Worry. See, we all have stress in our lives. That's unavoidable. It's part of living in this broken world, but it's how we respond. And worry is probably an inadequate word. A better word right here would be, don't get distracted. Do not worry about your life as to what you will eat, nor for your body as to what you will put on. Now you realize Jesus is saying something a bit absurd. For people who are hungry, for people who don't have a wealth of clothes, to people who have these physical ailments and things, their stress level's huge. And he said, oh, don't worry about food and clothes. How do you not? And so it's a very challenging thing that Jesus is saying to them. But he's not saying, I don't care about food and clothing. But I want you to think again, not so much about worry, which we know that, we all do that, but think about worry in terms of a distraction, okay? Luke 12:24. Consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor reap, they have no storeroom nor barn, and yet God feeds them. How much more valuable you are than the birds. Raven. It's the least of the birds, right? No one goes bird watching to see ravens. If you ask me, they're kind of ugly, right? Bluebirds, cardinals, robins. There's all these beautiful birds. Then there's other birds like quail that you can eat. You can even eat pigeons. But nobody eats ravens. They are the least of the birds. But if you're Jewish and you talk about ravens, you may have a different perspective about ravens. Let's look at 1 Kings 17. No 1 Kings? I'll read it to you. It shall be that when you drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to provide you there. So he went and did according to the word of the Lord. This is talking about Elijah. This is Old Testament, long time ago. For he went and lived by the brook Cherith, which is east of the Jordan. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he would drink from the brook. So the least of the birds is the ones that God chose to provide food for Elijah. So for Jewish people, yeah, it's the least of the birds, but they have this other kind of special connection. It's the one that God used to feed Elijah. And look what he's saying here. Let's go back to Luke chapter 12 and verse 24. How much more valuable are you than these birds? See, and again, from a Jewish perspective, you might think, yeah, because when God created the entire world and the universe, everything visible and invisible, he spoke the ravens into existence. But when it came to man, he got down on his hands and knees and from dirt formed man and breathed the breath of life into him. There's a difference between birds and man in God's kingdom and the value of those. It's not that he doesn't value birds or ravens or mountains or sky or anything in creation. He says, you're so much more valuable than that. Luke 12:25. And which of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to his lifespan? Now you think about this. This is also kind of a weird thing to say, except that we know that we do get distracted and we do worry, but we have solutions. See, because if I have a physical problem, I go to my doctor and my doctor gives me medicine. Guess what that medicine does? It prolongs my life. So I do want to add time to my life. I try to. Maybe if you're an exercising person, or maybe if you eat healthy, or whatever it is that you do that attempts to lengthen your life, we all do that. But there's a problem, right? Eventually, each one of us has an expiration date. So it's this weird thing that Jesus is saying again. And which of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to his life? If then you cannot do a very little thing, why do you worry about other matters? In other words, yeah, you can take medicine, you can eat right, you can exercise, you can do all these things, but you're still going to have an expiration date. And if you can't avoid that, why are you worried about all these other things? Why are you getting so distracted? Luke 12:27. Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin, but I tell you, not even Solomon in all his glory clothed himself like one of these. Again, if you're a Jewish crowd, you think about Solomon, you think about this splendor of Solomon in the temple and the wealthiest man ever who had gowns and crowns and so much available to him, provided to him by God. And now Solomon is being compared to lilies of the field. This is the kind of lily that grows in the Middle East. I forgot the scientific name. It's not all too pretty, right? I mean, there's prettier lilies, right? Kind of similar to the ravens. But these things grow wild. And the point of Jesus making here is that these things just grow. Nobody plants them. Nobody fertilizes them. There's no strategy. There's not a harvest season. They just grow. And Jesus is comparing the just grow to Solomon's robe that someone had to gather material, someone had to sew it, someone had to put it together, and saying, and this just grows. Think about how spectacular that is, comparison-wise. Luke 12, verse 28. But if God so clothes the grass in the field, there's a little transition here from the lilies to the grass, but he's talking about the same stuff. This stuff that just grows like weeds, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace. Now, again, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense for you and I, but you have to remember, they don't have propane tanks. They don't have wood because they're not rich. So when they need fire to cook with, guess what they use? The grass and the lilies. Tomorrow is thrown into the furnace. How much more will he clothe you, you men of little faith? Oh. Now he's talking to his disciples here, and these other people, some of them can hear. If you're, 10 people deep, you're not really hearing this, but he's talking about the disciples, and you're one of Jesus' followers, and you've been there with him the whole time. You're walking along with him. You're participating in everything, and he calls you a little faith. Harsh statement. But the context here is your value to God is more than anything in all of creation. Luke 12:29. And do not seek what you will eat and what you will drink, and do not keep getting distracted. Next verse. For all these things the nations of the world eagerly seek, but your Father knows that you need these things. Oh, there's a lot in this context here. So he went from bodily needs to nature, and now he's, for this Jewish people, he's comparing them to the Gentiles. And see, the Gentiles worry about all this stuff. Where's the next meal coming from? How good are my clothes? They're caught up in all this stuff. And worse yet, they don't have God, and they believe that if they don't provide for themselves, it ain't happening. If they don't provide for themselves, it won't be provided. And there's a really interesting thing here, because, go back to 29, please. I'm getting lost here. Sorry, verse 30. For all these things the nations of the world eagerly seek. A lot of people who aren't here today think if they don't provide for themselves, it won't be provided, or they need someone to provide it for them. But your Father, again, in a Jewish context, they think about the father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This would be Yahweh, God. They think about Yahweh, the father of Israel. But Jesus is taking this kind of broad scope of God and making it very personal. Your Father, more like your earthly father, your individual father, your heavenly Father, the Father who knew your name before he created the world, the Father who wove and knit you in your mother's womb, the Father who has known about you and has been a part of your life from conception. It moves from this big, broad sense to a very individual, your God. Matthew 6, verse 7. And when you are praying, do not use meaningless repetition as the Gentiles do. Again, comparison, right? For they suppose they will be heard for their many words. So don't be like them. For your Father knows what you need before you ask. Can you see how this has moved from a God who's kind of distant, far away, to your individual God, the God who's with us in this room right now, the creator of the universe, but he's your Father. Luke 12:31. But seek his kingdom and these things will be added to you. And here we go. Kingdom. This is where Jesus is bringing the conversation to. And you remember before, he as well as John the Baptist, what did they say? The kingdom of heaven is at hand. And you remember what I have been hammering on you about, what I just keep emphasizing to you about when it comes to the kingdom that Jesus is talking about? You remember how I keep saying, you've been over here thinking the life is like this, and I want you to change the way you think, to change the way you see things, to change the way you hear things, and I want your heart to change. Seek his kingdom. And when we talk about seeking here, remember, he just compared to the Gentiles and how they had this ambition and this striving and this working towards providing for themselves. And he's saying, compared to that, seek the kingdom that way. Have that kind of desire and passion for things of the kingdom. Don't get distracted. And when you do, for good measure, your material needs will be provided for. Now, this is kind of tough because when I say your material needs, not your wants, remember we looked at Philippians last week, my God will provide for all your needs. God will provide for your needs. Easy to say when you live in this country, right? I'm pretty sure that no one in here is wondering where their next meal is going to come from. I'm pretty sure when you go home, there's some extra clothes there and shoes. But I have been to places like India and Indonesia and China where they're still living like the beginning of Luke chapter 12, stressed beyond imagination, just trying to live, just trying to survive without food. In India, I was in Mumbai, and I think there's about 20 million people that live there, and it's not bigger than Houston. And the amount of children that are just running around with no supervision, not with a mom with them, is really heartbreaking. I saw a sign, it was a big sign. Now, anywhere in India that there's coverage, people live, underpass. It's not like here where there might be a few homeless people. There will be a whole community under the underpass. Cooking, living, kicking soccer balls. I mean, their whole life is under that underpass. And there was a big sign. And it said, in Hindi as well as English, no loitering and no camping. And then it had ropes hanging off of it where people had their clothes drying. And there was a burlap bag underneath it hanging there. And when I got up close, I saw that in the burlap bag hanging on the sign, about this high off the ground, this burlap bag, there was an infant in it. Do you know why the infant was hanging there? Because in India, they have everything that Africa has, just smaller. Meaning animals that would devour that infant. That's the stress that people in other parts of the world have that we don't have. So, when it says for extra measure, when you seek the kingdom, these things will be provided for you. I don't know how we explain our brothers and sisters in Sudan right now who are incurring genocide. Or Ethiopia, where children are traded for about $1.14. I don't know how to bridge that gap. But there is more to this conversation. Luke 12:32. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has chosen gladly to give you the kingdom. Oh, there's a wonderful thing right here, because Jesus is talking to his followers, he's talking to the disciples, and anyone can hear him. And what does he call them? Little flock. Which animals belong in a flock? Sheep. And therefore, if they are the flock, he would be the shepherd, right? And when we talk about the shepherd, think about John chapter 10, verse 11. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me. Even as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, I lay down my life for the sheep. Do you hear the personal relationship here? But for these Jewish people, this is New Testament stuff, right? I just told you. But for Jewish people, when you talk about shepherd, they might have a perspective there, right? Because you know the perspective. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So I've been referencing stress here. Our stress is different than it was in those times, and it's different than people who live in India and Indonesia. But we still have stress. Whatever that may be, economically, physically, relationally, there's still stress in our lives. And the message here is don't get distracted. Call it worry, if you will, but it distracts you. Because the Good Shepherd is with you. Now, one thing I have to mind you of is that thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Well, that's really cool because the rod of a shepherd could be used for fighting off things that are trying to hurt the sheep. But guess what else the rod and the staff do? It's used to hit the sheep in the butt to get them to move. There's a hook on the other end that grabs them and says, get back over here. And it's weird that this staff that hurts my butt and pulls my neck is comfort for me. But be sure there's going to be stress in your life because we live in a broken world. And the question is, are we going to be distracted? See, what happens with me when I'm distracted, I have stress, just like you all do, and if I told you my stress, some of you would laugh and say, that's nothing. Others would say, oh, that really stinks. But I have stress. And when I allow the stress to distract me, one of the things I do is I come to this side of my life, if you will, and I make everything black and white. I try to get control of it. I try to make my ideas, my way, work out and remedy the stress. The other side of the equation, I don't do this as much as other people do. And over here, it's just this overanalyzing, look at all the details, break it down to its least common denominator, put it on spreadsheets, just figure it all out. And Jesus is calling us to live more in the middle of those two things, where he is the good shepherd, and it may not make sense to you. You may not have an answer for the stress. Luke 12, verse 33. Sell your possessions and give to charity. Make yourselves money belts which do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven where no thief comes near nor moth destroys. Sell your possessions. A really important emphasis here is it doesn't say sell all your possessions and give everything you have to charity. You remember he was talking about the farmer whose land had given him a surplus. And he said, oh, let me build a barn and store all this stuff up. And what's suggesting here is that you and I, particularly in this country, we all have surplus. We have more than we need. And the question is, are we willing to help others with it? And then it says, make money belts. Make money belts which do not wear out. Again, money belts don't make a lot of sense to us, but what it's saying here is that the things of value in your life have an eternal focus on them, have a kingdom focus on them. And you say, well, what does that mean? First of all, where are you investing your soul? Is it kingdom focused or is it distracted? Secondly, where are you investing in your relationships? Are they kingdom focused or are they distracted? And thirdly, the material things that you have, whether it be money, home, whatever it is it kingdom focused or is it distracted? 1 Corinthians 16. Now concerning the collection for the saints, I directed you, the churches of Galatia, so do you also. on the first day of every week. When? Oh, by the way, when is the first day of each week? Sunday, okay? On the first day of the week, each one of you, how many of us? Each one of us is to put aside and save as he may prosper, so that no collections may be made when I come. This is the kind of very direct commandment kind of thing. And maybe some of us get paid on 1st and 15th or whatever it is, but you get the point. We all have more than we need. Will we be kingdom focused with our material possessions, or will we be distracted? And this one happens fairly easy and kind of goes back to this never satisfied kind of stuff, but probably is, I really need to control this stuff. It's mine. It's my home, it's my car, it's my job, it's my money. It's all mine. Luke 12:35. Be dressed in readiness and keep your lamps lit. So you remember, again, in this time, the typical wardrobe for men was this kind of long gown thing. And part of that helps with the heat, but it's also very easy to move around in. And the lamps being referred to here was a lamp that you would see kind of in a big castle. Luke 12:36. Be like men who are waiting for their master when he returns from the wedding feast, so that they may immediately open the door to him when he comes and knocks. So, men who have a master, what does it tell you about those men? If you have a master, that means you would be a slave, right? And so when it's referring to us as slaves to the master. There's a really interesting thing here. This master has gone to a wedding feast. And the reference here is to when Jesus ascended to heaven and returned to heaven after conquering sin, death, and the devil. Do you know what happened? Party like no other. A celebration like no other. The hugest celebration ever. Because God had kept his promise for mankind, and Jesus had conquered sin, death, and the devil once and for all. But you know he's coming back, right? And what is being suggested here is that when Jesus comes back, you and I should be ready to open the door. Be on the alert. But I also want to suggest to you is that there's one of two ways to open the door. Maybe we open the door like who's on the other side. But there's another way that upon Jesus knocking on our door, let me describe it to you like this. Everybody had a dog here in their lives? You ever leave your home or leave your dog for a while and you come back home, and how does the dog respond? Crazy. I had a dog one time, and a friend of mine gave me the dog, and I trained this dog really, really well. He would sit and heel, and he knew where he was supposed to go, and he was really well behaved. He could be on a full run out this door, and I'd tell him, stop, and he would freeze. But then my friend who gave me the dog, he came to visit me, and he pulled in, and my dog saw my friend, his prior owner, and the dog lost his mind, and I told him to stop, and he didn't, and he ran to my friend, and he jumped on my friend, which I had taught him not to do. He did everything I taught him not to do because he lost his mind. He was so excited to see my friend. I'm not suggesting your dogs, but that's the excitement, that's the response that can happen when Jesus comes, if you're ready. Do you get that? This exciting, wonderful thing, when he comes, it's going to be. Psalm 126. When the Lord brought back the captive ones of Zion, we were like those who dream. Then our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with joyful shouting. Then they said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are glad. Boy, this is a lot different than what he's given me is not enough, and I'm not appreciative. This is beyond appreciation. This is celebratory, out of control, like my dog when he saw his prior owner. Crazy celebration, beyond my control. Luke 12, verse 37. Blessed are those slaves. Who are we? For Jesus? Those slaves whom the master will find on the alert when he comes. Truly I say to you that he will gird himself to serve and have them recline at the table and will come up and wait on them. This is a text that is emotionally hard for me. It's really, really hard. Because you hear what it says? When Jesus comes back, we're all going to be at this wonderful celebration, this table of abundance, having a great time with the family members that we haven't seen in a very long time. The family members who went before us. We're all going to be there in this wonderful celebration. And who's the servant? Who's serving us? Jesus. Can you imagine that? The creator of the universe, our God, is going to serve us. Crazy. And when I imagine that, it creates this emotion in me of just unbelievable. How can that be? Well, I'll take you back to Psalm 23. What does it say in Psalm 23? You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Do you see the tie-in? Luke 12:38. Whether he, the master, comes in the second watch or even the third and finds them, so blessed are those slaves. The thought here is, when it talks about second and third watch, like, I don't know when it's going to happen, daytime, nighttime, I don't know what's going to happen, but when you least expect it, expect it. When you least expect it, expect it. And think about this wild celebration. Who's going to serve us? Luke 12:39. Be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have allowed his house to be broken into. You too be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not expect. And there's kind of a comparison contrast. Remember the door? See, if a thief shows up at my house in the middle of the night or during the day or no matter when it is, that's a scary proposition. Because, see, he's breaking into my house. He's not knocking on the door. He's forcing his way in, and he's going to do whatever the heck he wants. But our master comes back gently, and he's going to knock on the door. Revelation 3:20. Revelation 3:20 goes, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come to him and will dine with him and he with me. Revelations 3:3. So remember what you have received and heard, and keep it and repent. Therefore, if you do not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you will not know at what hour I will come. Revelation 16:5, behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake and keeps his clothes, so that he will not walk about naked, and men will not see his shame. 2 Peter 3:10, I'll just skip to the last one because I had a couple of more. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed with intense heat, and the earth and its works will be burned up. So I hope what you're hearing here is a couple of things. Number one, first and foremost, am I kingdom focused? Am I kingdom focused with my own soul? Am I kingdom focused with my relationships? Am I kingdom focused with my material things? Am I investing what is important in my life into eternity? And just to kind of pause for a minute and think, I've been thinking a lot, and I mentioned to Aaron that the story of the rich man was such that what made him rich was his land had prospered him. In other words, God had provided. And he had more than he needed. And I've been talking about an individual basis, which is important for us to think about. Am I kingdom focused on my individual life? Or am I distracted? But also, when I think about this group of Oikos, and this land has prospered us. It's been productive for us. And now we have more than we need. And the question becomes that we will begin to look at in a few months is, will we be like the rich guy and let's build bigger barns? Or will we be kingdom focused with what we have as a family, with each other, with the resources we have, and all that God's provided us? Can we be kingdom focused? Will what we do here be seen in eternity? Because I tell you, I learned this some time ago, this feast that we're going to have with each other. We'll all be there forever together, and with the family members who've gone before us. And it'll be so great unless one of y'all isn't there. Or somebody in my life who's important to me isn't there. Whether that's my family member or my friend or my coworker, do I care if they're not there? Am I kingdom focused in my relationships? And insofar as we are capable, what can we do? It's a question that I just kind of throw out there for you to wrestle with. For the people in your life who you're not sure, will you be kingdom focused? And kingdom focused is so difficult for me because I don't stress like the people did in Jesus' time, but I stress in my time. And yeah, I have more than abundance in my life because I live in the United States of America, in Texas. Yeah, it's hot outside, but we have air conditioning. I have more than I need in my life, but I still stress. I stress about finances. I stress about material things. I stress about my relationships. I have really bad arthritis in my body. It hurts a lot. I stress about that. But the question again is, am I going to allow these things, these temporal things that are part of my life, to distract me from what's important in the kingdom? Or am I going to let the good shepherd use his rod and his staff on me? Am I going to let the good shepherd, who reminds me that he is with me, that he's providing for me, and as we read in Philippians last week, will provide everything I need. Because see, I think part of the deal here is that when I think about brothers and sisters in Sudan and Ethiopia and India and what have you that don't have what I have, that are stressing out on the fundamental things of life, guess what? Perhaps, I don't know, perhaps in the abundance that I have, when I give and allow God to use it, maybe he provides for them that way. I don't really know. But I think that's part of it. I like a group that I really like that I regular tithe to. It's called World Vision. And if you don't know World Vision, look them up. They are awesome. They're one of the few charitable organizations where something like 84 cents on every dollar they receive goes towards people in need. Children, they got a bunch of stuff with kids. And I just told you a minute ago about India. There's all kinds of kids out there. I told you about Ethiopia where kids are being traded for $1.14. World Vision is working against that. And I don't know, maybe some people, not me, but get called to go to India or Ethiopia or whatever. That's not me so far. I don't perceive that. But I can still be a part of, be a tool of. There are people in this country, unfortunately, who are for want of food. I don't know if you know, but especially in big cities, there's a significant amount of children whose most important meal and their singular meal of the day comes from their school. And if they don't have school, like in the summertime, guess what happens? They don't have the daily meal in this country. And I'm not suggesting that we need to run to every problem and provide a solution. I'm just saying that perhaps when we are kingdom focused with our resources and not distracted, that there's no telling what God can do for people who are less fortunate than us. I don't know how that works out. It's above my pay grade. But it's also a very different way of seeing the world, hearing the world, thinking about the world, feeling about the world than what comes natural for me. Because what comes natural for me is make sure I'm taken care of. To my level of satisfaction, to what I want beyond what I need. Being honest. And Jesus saying, well, you need to change the way you think. You need to change the way you look at this stuff. So we're going to close this morning. We're going to close in prayer. But I also want to be really clear in communicating that Jesus is saying, don't be distracted by the things of this temporal world, like arthritis or body pains or wonky relationships or not having enough. But he's also saying, it's not that I don't care about those things, because we read where when we seek the kingdom, these things are provided for us. The question is, what's the relationship between the stress of my life and the distractions of my life? So, as we close in prayer this morning, is there anybody that has anything that we can pray about? Did I guilt all y'all into? I don't want to say that I have any problems because then I'm not being appreciative. Okay, well, we're going to close in a prayer, and let's just. Yep.
I've got a friend of mine that recently had heart surgery, and today they're having a benefit fundraiser for him. He's been out of work for some time now. So just pray for a blessing on that fundraiser and those get more money.
Yeah, real life stress, right? Don't get distracted. Anybody else? Okay, let's close in prayer.